How's it going, everybody? Got a really fun conversation today with Ryan Garcia. He's of Fireside Yankees. He's a notable metrics whiz if you follow him on Twitter. I wanted to have him on to talk about Isiah Kiner-Falefa because he's been one of the most polarizing players on the Yankees this year. Some fans like what he brings to the table. Others think that maybe the Yankees made the wrong choice at shortstop. A lot of fans wanted the Yankees to sign either Corey Seager or possibly Carlos Correa. Instead, the Yankees opted to go with the stopgap solution. Ryan definitely takes more of a metrics-driven approach to his player evaluations, and I also like to mix in a little bit of that old-school thinking. The part of me that looks at Isiah Kiner-Falefa and thinks, he does a lot of things really well that don't necessarily show up in the metrics or the box score. So I wanted to have this discussion. It's really more of a theolocution than a debate. We want to try and advance each other's thinking a little bit. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, and let us know in the comments what you think. So we'll try and move quickly to avoid interruptions. So to the audience, we just had a fire discussion. It was great. We went for about 20 minutes and then technology failed me once again. So I'm back with Ryan Garcia for the second time within the hour because we couldn't let this pass up. Ryan is with Fireside Yankees. He's one of the more metric-driven Yankees content creators. I enjoy his stuff. And I have this friend who's a Braves fan, but he also watches NYY Recaps. And because he watches NYY Recaps, he gets suggested Yankees content, and he forwarded me your video on IKF. I think it was titled something like Why the Yankees Should Cut Bait with IKF. And in our first discussion, we established that that may have been a bit too harsh, cut bait. So what we wanted to do, and what we did successfully in the first round, we're going to try to do successfully again, is give both sides of the argument for Kiner-Falefa as a shortstop, kind of the new school metric approach that Ryan is an expert on, and kind of the old school historical analog approach that I like to take with him. And we'll just let the audience kind of, decide what they decide. But Ryan, I wanted to kind of get you to recap what you went over in your video about cutting bait with Isiah Kiner-Falefa.
Is that Isiah Kiner-Falefa really doesn't provide anything that is extremely productive in terms of defense or offense. He's very much solid to above average defender, and there is inherent value in that. But when OPS plus is under 85, it's under 90, that value drops a lot. Now, the thing he does very well is base running. That's like undisputed. He does it very, very well. There's no metric that would disagree with you on that. And that's a valuable part of this team. We mentioned in the first discussion, we talked about, this team is part of the reason why this team is so different is that they're a very good base running team. We've seen time and time again. Yes, they have times when they get thrown out on the base paths, but it's usually being aggressive and the team just makes a very good play. More times than not, they succeed on the base paths when they're being aggressive and they force the other team to make plays they're not comfortable making. And oftentimes that leads to the Yankees having some really, really fun rallies and making other teams look pretty stupid. And that's as a Yankee fan, it's pretty fun making other teams look stupid. Yeah, it very much is, especially a team that we don't like. Like when we see Boston, Christian Vasquez throw a ball by the third baseman and because he's trying to throw out Josh Donaldson, who is not a noted fast guy. And that leads to a run scoring. That's awesome, right? Like objectively, that's awesome. That being said, though, I really can't say that for IKF's bat, you're getting enough. You're not getting great on base numbers, on base under 320. In other years, it'd be worse, but this year the run environment isn't great, so it's more so average. And the slugging numbers we know aren't great. Personally, I don't care for IKF to figure out how to slug because we both know he's never going to do that. I just care for him to get on base more. That's by, just having more of his batted balls go for hits. Like if he were to hit, I've talked about how I really don't care for batting average, but if he were to hit 290, his on base goes up, right? So that would be a situation where IKF's a much better player, a much better hitter. And suddenly the value goes up. So it's not impossible for IKF to generate more value and become a better ball player. But he has to start being a little more consistent defensively, and he has to contribute a little more with the bat because earlier in the year we saw this. I believe it was against Cleveland with Clase on the mound, where he just rockets a double off the wall and he brings the Yankees back to life, back into the game with 2 strikes and 2 outs. He stole victory from the jaws of defeat there, but in more recent at bats, he's more so jumping on pitches a little early on guys who maybe aren't the sharpest with their command and hitting it right at a shortstop or right at third baseman or right at a second baseman and making himself too much of an easy out. I think the tools could still be there, right? This isn't, he's also like 26, 27. It would have been impossible for him to kind of just hit a little bit better. And he's actually put up, I believe, a 93 OPS plus. I think it was in 2020. So if he can get to something like that, that's a pretty productive baseball player, if I say so myself. But with Oswald Peraza in the farm and him heating up, and Oswaldo Cabrera is heating up a little bit in AAA, there's more pressure on IKF. One of those 2 guys could definitely earn themselves a spot over IKF on the major league roster. And ultimately, it's just a matter of he's not great, or he's not great, but he's not above average right now, and that's not good enough for me. I think for the Yankees, if they get a fielder, if they get a starting pitcher, right, you'll be fine with IKF. This team has been very good with IKF, and I think they can win a World Series with IKF. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, the Yankees can't win a World Series without IKF. Then you haven't watched the games, because they've won, I think 61 games with IKF. So this is a very good team with IKF. I just think they can get a little bit better if they have Oswald Peraza, or potentially look externally if an option becomes available on the market.
You mentioned somebody that was an external option, plays for the Marlins. You want to dig into him a little bit?
Yeah, so Joey Wendell is an above average hitter. We've actually, if that name sounds familiar, it's because you probably remember being annoyed by him in Tampa Bay, because he was a longtime Tampa Ray, got traded to Miami because of financial constraints. We know how the Rays don't really like to keep role players who are getting expensive. And Wendell is a left-handed hitter. He has an average walk rate. His strikeout rate, I believe, is sub 10%. He's one of the few guys like a sub 10% strikeout rate. And I don't really pay attention to strikeout rate too much, but I can definitely understand why the Yankees don't want to stray in the opposite direction at shortstop with IKF. If they were to replace him, I think they would want a similar caliber type of player. They went out and got a specific type of shortstop, and it would be hard for me to imagine the Yankees trying to move away from that, which is good defense, good base running, good bat to ball skills. I imagine that those are the things the Yankees want from their shortstop right now. We saw this with catcher, where they said, we don't really care how much you hit, we just want a good. And I think that we have to do this as well, where it's, let's look at what the organization wants, not just what we want in a player, right? I would love to clone Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton and make them, ridiculous players, but I think Wendell presents much similar skills to IKF, but does it at a better pace.
Right. Okay. So, that's a pretty solid argument. Just in summary of your stance, he doesn't take enough pitches, doesn't see enough pitches per at bat, doesn't get on base that well. I think we have common ground that we went over the first time we recorded this, that defensively he's been underwhelming as far as what we were told he would be. We were kind of sold that he is this defensive wizard, and don't worry that he doesn't hit very much because he's a defensive wizard. But really, outs above average don't like him. Defensive run saves kind of do. So he's kind of in that twilight zone between the metrics that you don't really know exactly who he is. But the eye test, for me, hasn't been very good. I've seen him blow a lot of plays. That one last night was kind of brutal. But from the offensive standpoint, I can live with what he's giving us. And I'm going to go in a little different direction and kind of give you the old school reasons why I think the Yankees should at least hang on to him. And as we discussed in the first episode, maybe transition him into a super utility player, because I think he's a great super utility player. And I think he's, as a stopgap, he can get you through until Peraza is ready if you opt not to trade him. Last year's offense was lacking in critical areas. Offensively, it was too many strikeouts. It was not enough speed. There was some pretty poor base running. We mentioned how IKF improves in that area. A few of his positives address those areas. Like, he's got very good bat to ball skills. He's in the 99th percentile of whiff percentage. So in situations, and there's a lot of situations like this in baseball, where you've got the bottom of the order up and you need to put the ball in play. You got maybe the bases loaded, tying and go-ahead runs on base, and you got the infield in. You need somebody who can maybe not strike out, which I think is important. And he's got speed to, as you said before, force the issue. I get that, he doesn't have great exit velocity, and a lot of the modern metrics analysts will say, well, it doesn't matter that he puts the ball in play because he doesn't hit it very hard. But I would argue that his combination of putting the ball in play, even if it's soft, with that speed can force the infielder, if they have to charge a ball, a slow roll or something like that, to make a throw, to make a play. And they're not always going to make it. They're going to throw balls away. That can lead to runs. Situationally, I think that if you didn't have him and we did cut bait, he would definitely be a weapon that you would miss. I like his spray chart. He's tough to shift against because he hits the ball from line to line. I like that he sacrificed his body on that bunt last week or 2 weeks ago where it was an inside pitch, but it was a bunt situation, and he just bunted it off his finger. He just kind of threw caution to the wind. That's a very Brett Gardner play. It's a very Derek Jeter type play. And, he's improved over the last few months. So we talked about his split OPS, which is his OPS compared to the rest of the league in any given month. It went from a pretty horrible 55 in May to 84 in June, up to 99 so far in July, which is a small sample size, but I like the trend of going upwards. So lately he's been pretty much average offensively, at least, but I think we definitely have that common ground where I want to see more out of him defensively. I want to see the improvement happen. And obviously we would love to have all the best players. I mean, that would be fun to go out there and dominate by 10 runs every night. It would be just a joyous season, but sometimes you just need the right fit. And addressing the deficiencies that the Yankees had last year, they didn't make a lot of wholesale changes, but one of the areas where they made was at a key position of shortstop. And so far, year over year, they're a lot better. And, I asked in the last recording of this, is that cause and effect? Probably not. But it's a correlation that I really don't want to cast aside and just throw him to the cinders just because he's gotten off to kind of a slow start offensively. 4 starting members of the 2021 Braves ranked in their most games played at their position had an OPS under 100. Darno, Swanson, Ozuna, and Guillermo Heredia. Obviously, they supplemented their offense at the trade deadline with Duvall and Soler. So I feel like there's a pretty good chance that the Yankees might do something as well to supplement their offense in a way that allows you to kind of get through with IKF. But there's also that non-zero chance, like you mentioned, that Peraza comes up. He's been playing really well in the minor leagues, and I think he's on the precipice. I think he's probably one severe pulled hamstring away from taking IKF's job. If IKF tonight pulls his hamstring and is out for 6 weeks, Peraza's going to be in the big leagues tomorrow, and he probably won't give up that job until the end of the season. But I'd argue that as a stopgap, IKF has been kind of what the Yankees have needed. He hasn't cost you a bunch of games. He's played hard, and he's run the bases, and that's kind of what I want from him. In terms of our prospects, when it comes to Peraza, I feel like he's the more likely to be traded because, Cashman has this track record of not drafting great with his number 1 pick, and Volpe destroyed the minor leagues right out of the gate. So that's got Cashman excited. And just from a personal, professional standpoint, you don't give up on a project like that you're excited about. You put all this work into the draft, you nail the draft. The guy comes out and he's gangbusters and he's moving up the list, and he's a local kid, a Yankee fan, matinee looks. I just don't see them getting rid of him. And Peraza, not to say he's ugly, he's a good looking young man, but he doesn't have the same hype attached to him that a Volpe does. And so I don't think it's going to be as hard for them to say, well, we needed Luis Castillo and it was going to cost us Oswald Peraza. Like that would be something that if Brian Cashman said to me, I'd be like, hey, it costs what it costs, And I want to draw the historical comparison between IKF and a couple of guys that were integral parts of the late 90s dynasty. Before your time a little bit, but Luis Sojo was a great super utility player. His game was contact, and he had 0 power, and he could play all over the field. I think that eventually IKF would slip nicely into that role. Somebody who you can move around any day of the week, and then if you need a late inning base runner in the playoffs or somebody to pinch hit for a Joey Gallo who's going to be more likely to put the ball in play against a lefty, like I could see him fitting that role nicely. And because he's got such good bat to ball skills, I would trust him in a big spot. We talked about Joe Girardi a little bit. He was a guy who kind of had the same profile as, a defensive first player where you don't really care about his offense, and he would make the occasional really nice defensive play. But, you know, everybody's going to remember that big triple he hit off of Greg Maddux to help you win the 96 World Series. So even players who don't carry you offensively can have big moments if they're just solid. And I think he's just solid. You know, 2009, Ramiro Pena had an OPS of 80. Yankees carried him. IKF also, you know, he's a guy who he has that energy of you know, he hustles and he just plays really hard. And I think that's a really easy thing as a fan to get next to. Maybe we shouldn't get rid of him, but maybe he's not the ideal guy for very much longer. You know what I mean? I do think that we could get more offense out of that position.
Yeah, and I think the point making at the end there, right, where there are definitely very important role players who don't wow you with their OPS plus numbers. I think I look at where the Yankees bench looked like last year. The first guy coming off the bench for them, if there was going to ever be a stopgap, would have been Tyler Wade. Yeah. Right. And let's just be real here. That's not a starting caliber player. He's starting on the Angels right now. The Angels are terrible. I know many Angels fans who want Tyler Wade DFA'd, and it's even on a bad team, right? So look, Isiah Kiner-Falefa was better than what Gleyber was giving you in 2020 and 2021 at shortstop. Not saying that Gleyber was a bad player, but it's when he was playing shortstop for some odd reason, not even just the defense, the bat was really bad too. So if I'm not going to get offensive production, I'd like to at least have a solid to above average defender there, and Isiah Kiner-Falefa has given the Yankees that. You know, I think it comes down to maybe he gets more comfortable at the position, right? Like if he does get more comfortable and we see kind of a defensive surge, I mean, I know a lot of people don't really think about second half surges where it's like, hey, I hope the guy goes out and has, you know, hits 300 the rest of the way, has a great on base or slugs very well. I'm kind of just gonna be looking for Isiah Kiner-Falefa to have a great defensive second half, right? Yeah, because if he does that, then I really don't care about the offense at that point, because I think as long as you excel at one of the two things, especially as a shortstop, it's a really valuable defensive position, kind of like in basketball where you can kind of say it's even split, right? You're a really good defender, but you can't score. That's fine. You're a great defender. If Isiah Kiner-Falefa is a great defender and he can't hit, you don't care. He's a great defender. So I hope he gets a little more comfortable in that position. If not, you have the depth, definitely. I'll also say you mentioned Peraza for Castillo, right? I said this in the first discussion. If the Yankees walk away from this deadline with Castillo and Benintendi, and Brian Cashman tells me, yeah, we traded Peraza, IKF's a shortstop the rest of the way, and that's so that we can get Castillo and we can also get Benintendi. I don't know how you can say no to that. Yeah,
Sign me up.
You can't say no to that. You can't, right? I'd rather live with Isiah Kiner-Falefa out there than not get Castillo. I can't let Oswald Peraza stop me from getting Castillo. So
you absolutely do not want the Astros throwing Verlander Castillo at you, and that's exactly what's going to happen if the Yankees don't be aggressive. You know, I posted a podcast a couple weeks ago just saying that the Yankees need to go all in. I got a lot of pushback from people saying, well, if you had a 14-game lead, you don't really need to be all in. And I disagree, because I think that this is the year with the wide open window. Home field advantage is so important. You know, I'd rather not be the cat that toys with the mouse. I'd rather be the lion that goes for the jugular.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people miss the point that, and especially the point you're making right now, it's not about winning the division at this point. I think we have a good idea that if the Yankees lose this division somehow, we have far bigger problems than we're right. This is about beating the Astros, and my dad was talking to me about this actually yesterday. You're getting Castillo so that you can match up with a rotation like the Mets in the playoffs, right? You're not getting Castillo so you can beat the Rays out for the first place in the division. That's not why you're getting Castillo. As you mentioned, the Astros, they are a team that a lot of their bats, they came alive against a lot of the guys. Like Town could not handle those guys, right? And Town is, I know he's gotten roughed up a little bit late. He's an average major league starter, and as a 5-starter, there's value there. Don't get me wrong. I'm okay with Jameson Town on the team, but let's be real here in the playoffs. You starting Jameson Town versus you starting Luis Castillo is a playoff win difference, right? And every win in October matters so much. It's unbelievably valuable. And if people are afraid to give up a Peraza for Castillo, I'm not going to let that be the reason I don't get Castillo. He's too important to what the Yankees could be. I mean, I'm thinking about Garrett Cole and Luis Castillo in the same, that 1-2 punch. You get Severino or Nestor 3 and 4, whatever that is, whatever situation they figure out there, or Monty, whoever it is. Good God, that rotation is going to be incredible. And hopefully Isiah Kiner-Falefa is, just playing a little bit crisper, I guess the word is. I don't even know if it's better as much of it is just refined, right?
Tighter.
Yeah. Tighter.
Just right now, it's like he's a beautiful painting of, of whatever, of the Mona Lisa, but you got the eyebrows a little crooked. You know what I mean? It's like it's just not fitting perfectly yet. But I do want to draw the comparison to Didi Gregorius. When he first got here, and I don't know how well you remember Didi's first couple of years, defensively, he was not great. And he was also marketed as, kind of a big step up defensively from what you had with Jeet. And his OPS first year was 89, but by 2018, it was 124. So he did improve. We've seen the Yankees improve guys. The barrel rates for a lot of guys on the team have gone up this year. I have full faith in Dylan Lawson. And I think that we might see the OPS and the offense get a little bit better for Isiah Kiner-Falefa the second half, especially with taking pitches and things like that. I don't expect him to come out and hit 5 or 10 home runs. I think he's probably going to hit 1 or 2 at some point. You're going to run in. I mean, a pitcher runs into one once in a while. You got to run into a home run at some point. But overall, I do give him a little bit of a hard time defensively, but I think that given the Yankees options this winter, I'm glad they didn't spend hundreds of millions of dollars and went with the stopgap, because I'm anxious to see the young guys play. And I think he's been fine. And while we have our gripes about him, I'd be perfectly comfortable sticking with him, assuming, like you said, the Yankees improve in other words. Final word.
Yeah, I think, this is a good discussion also because it can kind of pull people, like when people have an opinion on a Yankee player, I feel like it's very strong one way or the other, right? And I think the second you kind of just talk it out a little bit, you realize the answer is a little more muddied, right? It's a little more gray than it is black or white here. And I think, you can kind of realize the team success matters more ultimately than having the player you exactly want at every position. And as long as this team plays well, and as long as the clubhouse is good with IKF, as long as Brian Cashman has confidence in IKF, as long as he plays at a competent level, the team wins, and I'm not going to sit back and say, well, IKF went 0 for 3 today. That really stunk. He stinks. This team, no. As long as we walk away with the win, and another thing too is the pitching staff's been very good, right? If IKF can continue to make more plays there, right, that helps you with giving up ground balls and getting outs, right? I think it's just. I think it's ultimately a matter of, can IKF be a little better? Yes. Can you maybe do better? Yes. Is it necessarily enough where you're willing to sacrifice other pieces? No. So IKF just has to get a little bit tighter, as you said. There is definitely a chance for him to get better, and he's definitely has some value to this team. And he's definitely helped change the identity of the team from last year's to this year's. And I just, I hope that people watching this video can kind of see that it's not too different. Perspectives on a player don't have to be so drastically different. You can stand on two different sides of the fence, but kind of find some common ground there.
Yeah, I feel like Brian Cashman is probably filled with a room of people just like you and just like me who are feeding him, the data, but also how does he fit in from just a eye test perspective. So Ryan Garcia, one of the up and coming baseball content creators and analytical minds that I've seen in terms of following the Yankees in the new school of analytical thinking. Ryan, appreciate it. Fireside Yankees on YouTube, at Fireside Yankees on Twitter. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.